and welcome everyone. We really got a great day here. We're being blessed by the sun coming right in the windows to greet us, and with each other's faces, with or without masks. I'm glad to see all of you here today, and also the people who are joining us remotely. No, I'm not Peg Brightman. She's not feeling well today. My name is Jenny Gelfin, and so I'm your service coordinator. If you're a visitor, if we have any visitors, we have a guest book at the back of the room, and we'd love to have your names. If anyone would like to introduce themselves to us, anybody? Checking, no one to introduce, okay. And though we're not having coffee hour, we are staying after the service to visit with each other outside, and there is cider, I believe. I like to visit an informative website called Brownie Locks. They describe it as unknown holidays, fun, silly, daily, weekly, and monthly observances. They're called designated days. Some of them are national, some of them are international, and some of them are whimsical. For instance, October is National Ergonomics Month, which I'm very glad about. So everyone is given license to squiggle in their seats and get as comfortable as possible during the service. Fidgeting is encouraged in order to make yourself comfortable. It's also Positive Attitudes Month. How are we doing with that? Good point. And this week is designated Spiritual Care Week. And I'm celebrating that in part by being here today with all of you. As you know, there are many announcements in our order of service or on the website. So I want to call your attention to, and we're going to have one extra announcement, which will be Richard. But let me call attention to the fact that Ann Winnie is here, and our special hash event is happening in November 2nd. It's a fundraiser, and it's also, people really love it. And she has the volunteer list of how you can help out. And she's here today, so you can see her. And 2 Saturdays from now is our fall cleanup day. And the more of us who show up, the quicker the few tasks we have to make the yard look nice will be all done. So you're welcome to come. Richard?
I have a cold, and I have that pleasure of the time when my voice is much lower, and in my dreams, I think it sounds sexier, but I'm not sure. I left my glasses. Hold on. Oh boy. Covenant groups are beginning in early November, so now's a good time to sign up. We're going to have online possibility, we're going to have an in-person possibility, and maybe with the use of this new device called the OWL, we can have a combined hybrid one. Some people in person, some people online. So it's a good time to sign up for that. Now, I was asked to do a little testimonial, and I thought back to 2007 when I was in a covenant group, and I gave a testimony at that time which I'd like to revisit with you. I was in a covenant group facilitated by Judy Williamson. I found a small community we created a helpful place to reflect on my life, to try to make sense out of my experience, and perhaps to make some progress in areas of struggle. The ideas put forth at each meeting usually provide a starting point to look at our experience and perhaps to see it in a different light. I found this very useful. I learned a variety of things through the process. Here's but one way, but a very important way, that the covenant group worked for me. This was 2007, when my wife Nancy Nye had died. and I was in the group, I had no choice but to see much of what we talked about in the covenant group through the lens of extreme sadness, loss, and loneliness. I know that many in this community have experienced deep loss. This is what I was saying at the time, and I'm sure it's still true at one time or another. I'm not sure if our reactions to loss are similar. Getting through the day without being an emotional mess was and still is an accomplishment. The possibility that anything good of any sort might come out of this kind of experience not only seemed remote, but somehow unfair to even think about. And yet the covenant group readings seem to keep coming back to that possibility. In one session we read My November Guest by Robert Frost. It begins, my sorrow when she's here with me, thanks these dark days of autumn rain are beautiful as days can be. She loves the bare, the withered tree, she walks the sodden lane. And later in the poem, the desolate, deserted trees, the faded earth, the heavy sky, the beauty she so truly sees. She thinks I have no eyes for these and vexes me for reason why. In a late winter session, we encourage to ask, what is nature telling us in this season? And we must muse about the rebirth beginning under the sun, under the snow and gray skies, and wonder how the darkness of the season may serve us. Finally, in one of the last sessions, Thomas More is quoted as saying, that sorrow is the entrance to the holy, and our discussion is about sorrow or suffering and the potential they hold for spiritual growth. All of these conversations and readings are going on in this session that Judy was running, and at the time it was just tremendous solace to me to be in that group and engage in those kinds of conversations. And this is a role that oftentimes a covenant group can play for you. If you have some struggle you're working on, it's a time you might get some inspiration from some readings and so on. The covenant group, with this feeling of safety and trust, helped me think about sorrow and loss in a fuller way. My situation in that group might have been different, but I believe others there discovered new ways to view and understand their experiences as well. And you can do this too. If you haven't been in a covenant group, give it a try, because it's a chance to be with others in a safe, trusting place, and where you get a chance to say what's on your mind and speak to the questions before the group, and everybody else just listens actively to you. So it's a great opportunity to dig deeper into who you are and also to connect to other people. So Francis Updegrove and I will have an information session which will begin 10 minutes after the end of the service. It will be in the parlors, and you can go get a glass of cider and come into the parlors and join us to get more information about the covenant groups. There are also registration forms in the back of the sanctuary. Thank you. Sorry that took so long.
So after these words, we'll have a period of silent meditation. We are here, sunlight infusing this sanctuary with white gold. No matter the distance from us, spinning our own paths, these tall windows welcoming and protective, high ceiling a boundary under the infinite, planks where our feet and bodies rest. The piano and organ bear witness to this community. One built into the walls like our body's lungs. One mobile yet full-throated, accessible, ready to stir our voices, joining diversity when someone's hands touch the waiting keys. I inhale the air you have released, air that swirled through him and we. Some parts of infinity cannot be divided, moving inside each and around all without distinction, changing us in subtle, sometimes unnoticeable ways, the ever-present love of elements touching each other. Some say time is an illusion, and so also distance. What really are light years and the space between hearts? These walls do not divide us from earth or sky. And if I shimmer a bit in the iridescence of you, then we're never separate nor lost to each other.
was a moment at a conference years and years and years ago. Conference was a gathering of youth group participants from area churches. Most of our church youth groups had maybe 10, 15, sometimes 20 people in them, and we would gather around in circles and have conversations. At conferences, we would try to get several youth groups together, so the conference size could range between like 50 and 100 kids, and we would get together at, I don't know, sometime on Friday night and spend all Saturday together, stay up most of Saturday night and wake up in a panic. We would be sleeping in a church, by the way, so this church sanctuaries would be transformed by sleeping bags and crushed Doritos and all manner of like paper airplanes and cranes and guitars at about 9:30, you know, at which point the church, our advisors would come in and say, why haven't you cleaned this place up yet? The congregation's going to be here in about 5 minutes. And so we would run ourselves crazy coming in and trying to clean the place before the service began. A service for which we were probably responsible, so we also had to like get out of our pajamas and also in that 30 minutes figure out what we were going to say, having chosen not to do the planning beforehand as had been on our schedule. I knew Eric Kaminetzky from all the way back then, and our friendship has lasted till this day. So I just want to give him a chance to introduce himself to you, one of the most special people in my life.
Thank you. My name is Eric Kaminetzky, and those of you who have been around and were here for the installation of the Reverend Dr. Leon Dunkley may remember that I was here. I had the privilege and the absolute pleasure of inhabiting your pulpit and yelling at him for 5 minutes uninterrupted. He couldn't say a word. It was beautiful. It was the charge to the minister. And to boil down 5 minutes into a sentence, what I said was, take care of yourself, beloved, because the health you maintain will be reflected in the health of the community you serve. And I know that the health of this community also supports the health of my beloved friend. Leon told you that we gathered in churches for youth conferences, made ourselves to home in the sanctuaries, and that has given us and our peers a real comfort with showing up in Unitarian Universalist places all over the world and feeling at home because we know what they're about. We know what you're about. We know what we're about. The last time I was here, it was pre-pandemic. We weren't wearing masks, and I'm so glad to be with you and to have you wearing masks. The congregation that I serve, the Edmonds Unitarian Universalist congregation, is masking. We've redone our air handling system as you have. We do contact tracing. And we had a conversation about what that means. And I think what we came to is that it's not security theater. It's living our values of communitarianism, that we care for each other. When I wear a mask, it doesn't protect me. That's not how masks work. When I wear a mask, it protects you. And when you wear a mask, it protects me. And for me, that is part and parcel of what we do together and what we've been doing together for a very long time.
I mentioned your wife, Kathy, in the beginning of the Circuits and Joys and Concerns. Kathy is a very elegant woman, very smart, very bright, very humble, and very smart. So we were in a car, Kathy was driving, Eric was in the shotgun seat, and I was sitting behind Kathy, who was driving the car. And playfully, and in the spirit of communitarianism, that we are all connected, I kept saying annoying things to Kathy, in the hopes that I would finally make her so angry that she would lash out, which I can be good at. And so when I was successful, she reached across and hit Eric, because I know that she couldn't reach me. That's my lovely Kathy story. Eric and I took a trip to the Civil Rights Legacy Tour. We went to the South to see a bunch of important sites in Alabama, Mississippi. We went to the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where Bloody Sunday happened. We went to the Browns Church. We went to the burial place of Viola Lisa. We traveled around in a bus 4 days for about a week. We went to see the site where James Reeb is buried. James Reeb is the Unitarian Universalist minister who was down south during one of the protest movements and was killed. He was beaten. Yeah, he was killed. It was fair to say that he was struck at a protest rally and then taken to a hospital where he was refused service because of who he was aligned with, and he passed down there. So we went to that memorial. We went to Montgomery, Alabama, where Martin Luther King had ministered. We went to his home, which is a very humble home. There was plastic on the couch, which reminded me of my grandmother's house. And I was deep in anxiety about the state of race relations in our country and what we were doing there. And I walked up the Capitol steps, and to beneath this white marble statue of a Confederate hero. And I turned around with a deep breath and a sigh to walk back down the way where Martin Luther King's church is visible from those steps, And I walked around and I turned around and saw my dear friend who was there with me in a helicopter beanie hat. You know those little hats with which grounded me for some strange reason in the reality that life changes and that we all have our different paths in life, and that courage takes different forms, and that lightness and humor are as important as fierceness and combativeness. So I want to do something right now before I just want to ask you to tell the Negro story. As a gesture of how I feel, and I hope you'll allow this, so you can go ahead and start telling it all.
So Leon and I have known each other since we were teens, as he said. And we've known each other as we've moved into our adulthoods through various professions, jobs, relationships, places. And Leon and I had talked about going into ministry for a long, long time. I first heard my call to ministry as a teen on Star Island. I was about 15 at my first LRY conference, week-long gathering out there. I'd been raised in the public schools. I'd been raised in a military equestrian club that was a precursor to ROTC, whose purpose was to train young men to become members of the horse cavalry when the Army had horse cavalry. So this was a leftover of that. So I knew what a vertically integrated organization and hierarchy looked like. I went to this youth conference and saw people my age running the program. And it hit me that that's what I want to do. I want to build community, and I want to help people be who they are in their own skins. But I thought that I needed to have some other kind of life first. And I went to college and I went to law school and I practiced law and I was 40 at a General Assembly when it hit me that I'd had that other life. It was time to go to seminary. And I looked around, I was married, had a kid, my wife was moving through her training into her career in medicine, and I decided I really wanted to take a look at the Meadville Lombard School of Theology. They had a Prospective Days program where you could pay $100 or $200. They put you up for the weekend, run you through a little seminary experience, meet the professors, meet some of the students. And I signed up for that, and Leon and I had been talking about this for so long, just over and over. So I signed myself up for it, and then I signed him up too. And I gave him a call. He said, hey. I said, hey, how are you? He said, I'm good. What's going on? I said, oh, well, I signed myself up for the Meadville Lombard Prospective Students Program, and I signed you up too. And there was a pause. And the words I heard on the phone were, I am so angry with you. And that is emblematic of the contours of our relationship. We love each other. We hold each other accountable. To be clear, he's smarter than I am, he's better looking than I am, and he's kinder than I am.
That's true too.
But other than that, we're practically identical twins. With one important distinction. I would characterize Leon as fierce, and I would characterize myself as stubborn. And when we work well together, it is brilliant. And when we fight with each other, it's something.
Thank you for that. I just have to tell one quick story I hadn't planned to tell. In seminary, a lot of the practice of Unitarian Universalism is pretty kind. Like kindness is almost a theology. I didn't grow up around that. I grew up around honesty being the theology. And so did a colleague of ours named Barb Grieve. Barb. Barb Grieve is a trans man, a year in advance of me, a year in front of me. When I went to Star King, I lived in a house with Barb. And I was dating a very attractive woman at the time who he couldn't stand. Okay? And this woman called me on the phone. It was at a time when the house phone rang, remember back in the day? And Barb answered the phone and then had a fight with this woman who was interested in me. And then did not give me the message that she even called. So I had to find out sometime later that she had called me. I was like, why haven't you called? She's like, I did, and I left a message with Barb. And so I came home. Our house had these stairs that you walked up into, and then the kitchen was around, the seating place was around the corner where all of my housemates were. I lived in a house of 6 people, all seminarians except one. And then Barb was by the refrigerator right in front of the door. So I opened the door and I was like, Barb! And we had a knockdown, drag-out fight for about 2 minutes. Where Barb said everything Barb needed to say, I said everything I needed to say, and then I was like, okay, we good? We're good. And we hugged. We were just honest with each other, we got the things out. We were done. I went around the corner to go up to my room, and all of our housemates were like, just shattered, had never heard us fighting that way. But how we deal with conflict and how we deal with challenge is something that's an important part of our theology. I want to ask you to tell a story about coming into challenge in Colorado on a 2-wheeler. Mm-hmm. Would you mind sharing that story?
Sure. In an earlier part of my life, I was busy rebelling against my mother. Am I the only one who's ever rebelled against their mother?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I see the arms folded. That was beautiful. Arms folded across the chest. That was beautiful. My mother would never let me have a motorcycle. So I grew up in New Jersey. I got into college in Boulder, Colorado. So the first thing I did before I found housing was buy a motorcycle. And bought motorcycle after motorcycle after motorcycle. And finally, I had brokered a deal with a friend of ours. He had a Harley Davidson, and the motor needed rebuilding. And he wasn't really that interested in the motorcycle. And I said, you know what, I'll pay to rebuild the motor if you'll let me use it. He was fine with that. So got the motor rebuilt. I was in law school at the time. And I took a ride up in the mountains west of the then Rocky Flats nuclear trigger plant, which was just west of Denver. I got up over the front range of the Rockies and wound up having a head-on collision with an oncoming Subaru. At that time in Colorado, and I don't know what the present state of the law is, there was no helmet law, so I wasn't wearing a helmet. I wasn't wearing particularly protective clothes in that era, and I broke myself pretty good, mostly from the middle of my body down. They life flighted me out of the canyon, and I spent maybe 3 weeks in the hospital in traction and started a newer chapter of my life that was less dependent on the body I had grown up in and was now trying to reckon with the body I had. And the theological question, though I wouldn't have said it that way then, was about learning to ask for help and learning to accept help. And it was humbling, and it was brilliant, and it was beautiful, and it has made all the difference. And but for that accident, I can't tell you that I would be who I am today. I can tell you I would not be married to my wife Kathy because we couldn't have met. So when I look back on that, it's all to the plus. I can't use this body to run, but I run a beautiful life, and I get to be here with you, and that is a joy for me.
If I were to ask you, well, first, thank you for sharing that. When I got the news of the accident, I don't think I ever told you this. My heart sank. I got very afraid. Eric is a strong-willed, high-personality kind of person, and an accident like this can change your spirit, can change who you are. So there was a good few months in there I was just like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how this is going to be. A bunch of his friends, and I was not among them because I didn't know about this at the time, but a bunch of his friends got together and pooled money to buy an expensive, high-quality Taylor guitar. I own a Taylor guitar right now. It's actually in the car. I decided not to bring it in. The reason I bought a Taylor guitar was because of this story. So people pooled their money, bought a Taylor guitar, and delivered it to Eric while he was still in the hospital. He wrote, do you remember the first words? He wrote a song on that guitar.
I'm trying to remember the first words. Don't ride your Harley against a Subaru. They're made out of tinfoil, but they're a mother to get through. You might try it on a Honda, see what it does to you. Don't ride your Harley against a Subaru. And it goes on and on and on.
It's a country song. And we did not grow up in that tradition. And so I write these she held tightly to the reins as if she had fallen once before. These esoteric and romantic things don't ride your Harley against a Subaru. It's really fun, and I heard the first line, I was like, oh, got him back. Is there something about, so I found your courage to go through and become a leader, institutionally and denominationally and congregationally, inspirational to me. right now we're in the middle of a month where we're talking about a lot about conflict. Is there anything that you can share about the idea of conflict that might be of service to a church in Unitarian Universalism?
Well, thank you for that. You know, as we come through this pandemic, and who knows what's coming, as we come through this pandemic and we start coming out of our houses and start coming back together, my observation on the people that I serve, whom I love deeply, I'm in my 13th year with these people, is that we've all gone a little feral. We've been sitting home a long time, we've been watching all kinds of nonsense on the screen, we've been rereading the books we read a long time ago, and there is a level at which we've forgotten some stuff about how to be together. Some of us have gotten a little more sensitive about who we are. I think at the heart of Unitarian Universalism, at least in one part of that heart, is, as Leon said, the courage to be honest, to be kind, which for me is very different than being nice. Kind can be fierce. To be honest about who we are, about what we have to bring, about what we need to figure out how to rebuild our communities so that we are welcoming to each other and to the stranger. On Sunday morning, at our best, we are a public house. And people should be able to come in here and feel welcomed. Conflict, for me, as an ethnic Jew raised in Unitarian Universalism, is central to our love language. If you're not willing to fight with me, how do I know you even love me? If you're willing to let me walk all over you, how can I respect you? Healthy conflict is absolutely necessary. I don't go out of my way to start conflicts except with people like him, but that's because it's fun. But being willing to engage with who we are and why we are here makes a difference.
I wish we could talk a long time, but I want to close with a story that brings us back to that moment in Alabama when I was on the steps looking at the Martin Luther King Church and seeing my friend in the helicopter hat and the chuckle that it brought to me. A pretty radicalized African-American dreadlock man walking with this guy whose head is... It's a look, it's a look. But I've been going to Star Island since I was 17 years old. I tried to go when I was 16, but my grandmother was dying that year. My father's mother was dying that year, and my parents did not allow me to go. I was literally I was packed up at my friend's house to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to get on, in New Jersey, to drive to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, to get there by 9 to drop off our bags. I was so excited. And my parents, I'll tell it, I wouldn't tell my parents, I don't even know if you know this. My dad called me on the phone at the Gibson's house and said, you can't go to Star Island. You need to come home. And I said, why? I'm paying for this. He said I could go if I raised the money. They said, if you go to Star Island, don't come back. And I was blown away. I was like, okay, I think I've done worst thing I've done is like steal my sister's album. I'm like wondering what's going on. I didn't know my grandmother was dying at that moment, and that he needed me home and wasn't able to say that. He was not the kind of guy that could say that clearly. He told me he loved me in other ways. So I didn't go that year, but when I went the next year, we gathered on the front porch and we sang a song. It was very interesting. We sang, "I am an old woman, named after my mother." Right? The old man was another child grown old. If dreams were thunder, lightning was desire, this old house would have burnt down a long time ago. Make me an angel that flies from Montgomery. An Angel from Montgomery was the song that we sang. I love that song because it lets me, as an African American dreadlocked man, say in an opening way, I am an old woman, in a way that says, I see myself in you, and my prayer is that you see yourself in me. An Angel from Montgomery, colloquially, was a stay issued by a court. It was a stay of execution after a death penalty had been sentenced. So an Angel from Montgomery was the letter that you got when you were on the road that let you know that your life was saved. Make me an angel that flies from Montgomery. Make me a poster of an old rodeo. Just give me one thing that I can hold on to believe in this living. It's a hard way to go. There's never been a time that I've been at Star Island when I have not sung that song, or we have not sung that song. Oh my God, there's another story that just came up about, I'm not going to tell you the song, I'll tell you later, but it was at the time where Eric let our dinner mates believe that we were lovers. Now, I'll tell you the story.
It was plausible. It was plausible.
I'll tell you the story at another time. And the most important thing I can say right now is that I'm so glad for the years of friendship. There's a picture of us on that same porch with blankets over our knees because it gets cold out there. And I think of the song Old Friends, sitting on the park bench like bookends. I'm glad for these years. It's been annoying and frustrating and ridiculous and fantastic, and I couldn't imagine a better partner in the industry. I'm sharing this because I wanted you to know some of the backstory and some of the real life that goes into making every word and every gesture that happens inside of this house something that genuinely feeds our lives and allows us to grow. There isn't a moment, there isn't a detail, there isn't a non-decision that is not in the core of my heart. Do you know what I mean by non-decision? There are times when I do not act and go home and pray about that non-action that does not, that I do not imagine serving the messengers of the church in the humble way that I can see them from this inadequate station. And we can only do our best, and it's such a joy to be a part of. Thank you for joining us. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.